All right, today we're diving into something pretty wild, a prediction from our source material that the world's only superpower, the United States, is actually heading for a defeat. And not just any defeat, a defeat by a nation it's had under sanctions for more than 40 years. So let's unpack how a scenario like that could even be on the table. So can it really happen? That's the big question here. And according to an analyst cited in our source, a figure they call Professor Sane, the answer isn't just maybe, it's a definite yes. He's arguing that this isn't just about who has the bigger army, it's about a fundamental geopolitical shift that could literally change the world as we know it. So who exactly is this person making such a huge claim? Well, the theory comes from this Professor Sane, who the source describes as an expert in game theory. And here's why people are listening. He's reportedly made a series of predictions, and the source claims 2 of them have already come true. And that, makes you pay a bit more attention to his third and most dramatic forecast.
Okay, so here they are, the 3 predictions laid out in the source. First, the professor apparently said Donald Trump would win re-election. Check. Second, he said that a major war between the US and Iran would kick off shortly after that. Check. The source presents these first 2 events as the setup, the 1-2 punch leading to the third prediction, which is what we're really digging into today, that America will be defeated in this war.
And this isn't just some abstract geopolitical game. The stakes, according to the source, are incredibly high for you. The material states, and I'm quoting here, that if this third prediction comes to pass, the economic fallout could be so devastating that the money in your bank account could become waste paper. I mean, that really connects this big global theory to your wallet, right?
So, how on earth could a superpower be defeated like this? Well, the theory doesn't suggest a classic head-to-head military victory. No, it all comes down to what the source calls Iran's meticulously planned asymmetric war strategy. And get this, it's a plan they've allegedly been working on for 2 full decades.
And if we break down this timeline, the source claims that for 20 years, Iran's been gearing up for what they see as a final war. Then, in the 8 months right before the conflict, they supposedly did a deep dive, analyzing every weakness they could find in the US and Israeli militaries. And all that public talk about dialogue? The theory says that was just a tactic to buy more time. Now here's a really key part of this strategy. Iran isn't supposed to be fighting directly. Instead, it's leveraging this whole network of proxy forces all over the region. We're talking about the Houthis in Yemen, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Palestine, and other Shia militants. According to the source, these groups have gotten really good at countering American military tactics.
And we're not just talking about winning a few skirmishes here. The alleged master strategy is, well, it's way more ambitious than that. The goal is nothing less than to destroy the entire American empire and global economy. So the targets they choose aren't necessarily for military value, but for their economic and strategic shock value.
So forget about these Hollywood-style attacks on military bases. The strategy is supposedly much smarter. It involves hitting the lifelines of America's allies in the Gulf. Think about it. Targeting things like water desalination plants, which supply over 60% of their drinking water, or the sea lanes that bring in 90% of their food. The idea is to create a crisis so deep that America can't possibly ignore it. Okay, so that brings us to the economic heart of this whole theory, how they could weaponize the global economy itself by going after the petrodollar system. All right, stick with me here, because this is where it gets really interesting. The source basically calls the current system a financial Ponzi scheme. Here's how they say it works. Gulf states sell their oil for US dollars. That keeps demand for the dollar sky high. Then, they take those billions and reinvest them back into the US, especially into the hot new AI bubble. But what happens if a war stops them from selling oil? That whole flow of money just stops. The alleged result? The AI bubble bursts, and the entire US economy could come tumbling down with it. But you've got to be asking, right? Why can't the most powerful military on Earth just stop these attacks? Well, that leads us to what the source calls the great mismatch, this huge imbalance at the core of the conflict. The argument here is pretty simple, actually. The US military is supposedly built for the wrong kind of fight. It's got this Cold War mindset, focused on these massive, super expensive, complex weapons designed to scare another superpower. It wasn't designed for a messy, decentralized, low-cost war like this.
And this is where the economics of it all just get crazy. To shoot down a drone that costs, say, $50,000, the US often uses an interceptor missile that costs around $2 million. Think about that. You just can't win a war of attrition when the math is that stacked against you. It becomes this massive, unsustainable economic drain.
I mean, just picture that difference in cost. It is absolutely staggering. The source basically argues that fighting this war is like using a freight train to stop a car. Yeah, it's effective, but it's insane overkill, and it's bankrupting you in the process.
And it's not just about the money, which is bad enough. There's a huge strategic cost, too. The theory claims the U.S. is burning through its advanced missile stockpiles so fast that it's having to dip into the reserves, the same reserves that were meant for a potential conflict with a major power like China.
Okay, so that all lays out the how, but it leaves a massive question, right? The why. Why get into a war that you're supposedly destined to lose in the first place? Let's dive into the alleged motives and secret agendas behind it all.
So according to Professor Sane, it boils down to three things. First, pure overconfidence after a successful operation in Venezuela. Second, personal, political, and financial gain for key figures. And then there's the third one, which, well, it takes us down a much deeper rabbit hole. The idea that this war is part of a hidden agenda driven by powerful secret societies.
Yeah, this is where the theory really veers into some deep conspiracy territory. The claim is that what happens on the world stage isn't random at all, but that global events are actually being orchestrated by a few powerful secret groups pulling the strings from behind the curtain.
And the source gets very specific here. It names three groups in particular. You've got the Jesuits, who are said to control the Vatican. Then there are the Sabbatean Frankists, who allegedly hold sway over Israel's power structure. And finally, the Freemasons, who are claimed to control the U.S. national security apparatus.
And here's the kicker. The ultimate claim is that these groups aren't even acting on what we'd call normal geopolitical logic. They're supposedly following a pre-written spiritual script. The idea is they believe a great war in the Middle East is a necessary step to fulfill some kind of end times prophecy, and they'll pursue it no matter the cost.
So, it all comes together in this really wild, paradoxical conclusion. America is apparently fighting a war where, according to this theory, even if they win every single battle, they still lose. A military victory would actually be a catastrophic strategic defeat, because the economic and geopolitical fallout would be so severe that the U.S. would come out of it weaker, its empire shattered.
So after all that, what are we supposed to make of this? Is this a truly chilling and insightful geopolitical analysis that sees the writing on the wall?